Famous TV presenter Zeyin Alipbek came to the Khabar TV channel at the age of 23 and began his career as a correspondent. Over time, he became not only an excellent announcer, but also a favorite of the public. I'm sure that it's a big responsibility to broadcast news on television. When you are in the foreground, it is almost impossible to please everyone. Do you hear criticism? If so, what kind of criticism is this?
Елдің бәріне бірдей жағу мүмкін емес, ешуақытта ол ешқашан мүмкін болмаған, қазір де мүмкін емес, кейін де мүмкін болмайды. Жеке басыма қатысты сынды естіп болған жоқпын әлі әзір.
Yes, it is impossible to please everyone. This was always going to be. I have not yet heard criticism of myself. Sometimes it happens on social networks when people speak about the sphere of my professional activity. For example, they say, you work on a state channel that does not always tell the truth. But I have not faced the criticism with regards to my profession as a journalist or presenter. If people criticize you, then it comes to me too. Yes, this is our common deal. What would you answer?
Енді ол жауап біреу ғой, редакциялық саясат деген болады.
There can be only one answer. There is such a thing as editorial policy. Let it be a newspaper or television. The channel where I work has its own editorial policy, and the information we submit is consistent with the editorial policy of the channel. For example, other private channels have their own editorial policies. And of course, employees working on these channels give out information in accordance with their information policy. As we've started talking about the Khabar TV channel, then I would like to mention that this year our agency will celebrate its 25th anniversary. In your opinion, what role does the Khabar TV channel play in the life of our country and in its development? I think this is a very big role. First of all, Khabar is the first Republican television channel created at the dawn of our independence. This is a national channel that brought some special novelty. Of course, in the mid-90s, in the early 2000s, there were not so many television channels in our country. There were only a few of them. What contribution did Khabar make? Khabar called for the integrity of the state, for the unity of the people, for the development of the country, and for the strengthening of unity. Therefore, of course, if you look from this point of view, then Khabar has its own special place.
Zeyin Alipbek пен Khabar бұл өзі бір-бірінен ажырамас.
Zeyin Alipbek and Khabar. It seems that these names are inseparable because if someone mentions you, then Khabar comes to mind and vice versa. We say Khabar and then we remember you. My generation of journalists and I are those who grew up watching you on the air and following you. It's been over 20 years since you started working on TV. This is a kind of record. Aren't you tired of the airtime?
Кісінің, мысалы, тұтастай бір телеарнаның атымен байланыстырыла аталуы бұл зор мәртебе деп есептеймін. Бірақ мен бірден айта кеткім келетін нәрсе.
I think it's a great honor when your name is associated with the name of the whole channel. But I want to say that I never thought and did not strive to ensure that my name was always associated with the brand of a particular channel. If we talk about whether I'm tired of broadcasting, I honestly admit that I never got tired of this work and it never bothered me, because it is my profession. I should always strive for high quality and impeccable work. If there were other thoughts, then about what else I can do besides being just a TV presenter. Such burden of thoughts once forced me to refuse the role of a TV presenter. Indeed, it happened.
Ондай болды. 2015 жылы білім және мәдениет сол кездегі телеарнасы директордың міндетін
In 2015, working as the acting director of the then existing television channel Bilim Jene Medeniyet, I of my own free will thanked the leadership for the honor and left the Khabar Agency. Many were surprised at this, but I had my own vision and conclusions, which I had made for myself at that time. I knew all ins and outs of the newsroom. It looked like a constantly working conveyor. And I didn't like quiet work at Bilim Jene Medeniyet, where everything was going calm and easy. This is the first. Secondly, to be honest, I had already had 20 years of career. I started as a correspondent, then I became a TV host, then editor, chief editor, director of the Directorate of Information and Analytical Programs, deputy director of the channel. In a word, I went through almost all levels. Therefore, I wanted to try another area. This was the sphere of public relations, press service. Thus, in 2015, I left the Khabar Agency. And then, leaving Khabar, I said to myself, I will no longer return to the work of the TV presenter. But the Kazakhs have the expression, what you run from, you run into. 3 years later, the management of the Khabar Agency invited me to work as a news anchor. I do not like to reject offers and always try to accept them. Therefore, I agreed. You are a skillful TV presenter and reporter. You manage to maintain a balance between these two specializations, and this is not common in journalism. What is closer to you?
Шынында да бұл екі бірдей тізгінді алып жүру оңай емес. Мен негізі осы журналистикаға жазу сызу арқылы келген адаммын. Мектеп қабырғасында.
In fact, it is difficult to balance between these two areas of our profession. But I'm the person who became a TV presenter thanks to my writing skills. Back in school, I wrote articles for a district newspaper. Then I studied at Al-Farabi Kazakh National University at the Faculty of Journalism, specializing in periodicals. And having graduated the university, I had to go to work as a reporter in a newspaper. But it turned out that I got on television and spent the bulk of my professional activity here. The most amazing thing is that I became popular not as a journalist, but as an announcer. I am very close to journalism, the work of a correspondent. I like to write. When I have free time, I try to do it. To be honest, it would be an honor for me to become a popular journalist rather than an announcer. The success of an announcer, in fact, depends on the nature of man. Many say that they are preparing for this, train their voices, and so they become news anchors. Perhaps voice is important, but if you don't have other qualities that will make the public accept you, this is a completely different matter. In fact, my skill originated from my nature. I didn't especially prepare for this. I didn't even think that I would become a TV host. Every TV host has his own approaches. Are there any that you don't like?
Тістеніп жүргізген дұрыс емес енді. Содан кейін қатты дауыс көтеріп жүргізген де қажет емес шығар деп ойлаймын. Екпіндетіп. Қазір бір үрдіс қалыптасып келе жатыр.
Probably it is wrong when the presenter gloats on the air. Also, I think it is not necessary to speak too loudly, vigorously. Now there is such a trend to talk shouting, to speak in a loud voice. Maybe this is naturally. Maybe this is due to the nature of man, I think. But my nature is to work calmly, not in a hurry, slowly. I like it so much. It happened when I was asked to change my style, and I tried to change. But it is out of my power. I guess this was understood by both me and the management. For example, they gave advice on how to anchor the news more dynamically. They said that I should move more, speak faster. It could be done, but since this does not correspond to my nature, it would look somehow unnatural. They say that television is an X-ray. Viewers see right through the person when he is on the air. From the TV screen, it's hard to fool the viewer. It's hard to be not real. The simplicity is visible, it is instantly striking. Frankly, I don't have any special way to be remembered by the public. I never thought about that. I had only one goal: to announce news to the audience as accessible and understandable as possible, so that the audience immediately understood what was being discussed. What qualities should a good announcer have?
Менің қолымда көрерменнің де сұранысы солай деп ойлаймын. Ең бірінші кезекте диктордың дауысы жағымды.
In my understanding, and I think viewers are of the same opinion, first of all, the announcer should have a pleasant voice. If, for example, the announcer is a man, then his voice, I think, should be powerful. For example, earlier on our radio was our Kazakhstan's Yuri Levitan, Anwarbek Bayjanbayev. That's exactly what the voice of the announcer should be on television and on radio, I think. Then we still listen to the audio recordings of the poet Mukagali Makatayev, preserved in the original recitation of the author. He read his poems, and this is an example of tempo, rhythm and voice for announcers. I think so. Whom did you follow?
Жүргізушілікке қадам басып, жүргізушілікпен айналыса бастағаным ол 2000 жылдарға жақын кезең ғой, 90 жылдардың. Сол мен келген кездегі аға буын жүргізушілерден айтатын болсақ, ол сол кездегі мына эфирге шығып жүрген, жаңалық жүргізіп жүрген ағаларымыз.
I began my career as a TV presenter in the late 90s and early 2000s. At that time, I followed the late Tanis Otabayev, as well as our Abdirali Balibay. Thus, I began my work looking at them. Veterans of the Kazakh television, Lasker Seyitov, Sawik Zhakanova helped me in my undertakings in practice. I watched them and I grew up. Although Sawik Zhakanova worked on the radio, she taught us how to read texts correctly, how to set intonation correctly, how to revive a text. I learned everything from them.
Дауысты қалай, мәтінді қалай оқу керек, әр нәрсеге қалай екпін тастау керек, мәтінді қалай жан бітіруге болады мәтінге. Осы кісілердің үйрендім деп айта аламын.
Қалай дегенмен де дауысқа күтім керек.
Be that as it may, but still the voice requires special care. Are there any exercises that you perform every day to train diction and clearly and correctly pronounce the words? Let this be an advice for colleagues who are following your example.
Жақсы, бір кеңесімді айта кетейін, өзіме ол үнемі ұстанатын нәрсе.
Well, I will give one piece of advice. The rule that I took as a basis is to always read the text out loud. You can stand in front of a mirror or just read it out loud, but at the same time you need to record your voice on the recorder and then listen to it. I think this is one of the main exercises, because the more you read the texts, the more intensively your tongue will be trained, the jaw will get used to the words. And the more you listen to yourself, the more it will be clear to you what should be corrected, where to read more dynamically. This will all come with time, and a person will begin to understand this. When you first went on the air, you probably were very worried. Are you worried now?
Yeah, әлі күнге дейін қобалжимын, себебі әрбір эфиріміз ол тікелей эфирде жүреді, әр жаңалығымыз. Тікелей эфирдің өзінің үлкен жауапкершілігі бар. Алғашқы шыққан жүргізген эфирім.
Yes, I'm still worried. Each news broadcast is live and every time it is a big responsibility. My first broadcast was in 1997 on the Khabar TV channel. It was a 5-minute Khabar business program and it went live. And suddenly I came out as the host of this program. So those 5 minutes seemed to me like 5 hours. I was preparing for 2 days. I was excited, thinking how everything would go, what if I would fail. Another difficulty, or rather feature of the news, is the text. It is not prepared in advance, but most often it falls into your hands 5 to 10 minutes before the broadcast, and you just do not have time to prepare thoroughly. This is one of the main difficulties of live news. The text of that first 5-minute program came to me 2-3 hours before the broadcast. I almost learned it by heart. The 5-minute text is approximately 2.5 sheets. I don't remember how I did that broadcast. The only thing I remember is how I started and how I ended. Then, of course, I watched the record, and honestly, I didn't like it. Were there moments when you made gross mistakes during the broadcast? To be honest, no. Perhaps this is because I always carefully train and go on the air prepared. I am always responsible at work. I always read the text before the broadcast, get acquainted with it, train my eyes, read it aloud, and thus understand in advance how to correctly arrange the intonation, how to announce this or that text to the viewer. When you prepare in advance, such conclusions come on their own. That's analyzing everything. I prepare and go on the air. Preparation takes a lot of time. At first glance, it seems that they just read the news aloud. But before the broadcast, the host should have at least 2 to 3 hours of painstaking work. So it should be in reality. But ideally, this is of course my personal opinion, if in the morning they give a task and in the evening we are preparing a 30-minute news release, then the TV host should be present in the process of all this work from the very morning. This is the only way to fully realize the work and announce something truly worthwhile. And of course, to present the news in an interesting way.
Егер диктор болмағанда, журналист болмағанда,
if you did not become either an announcer or a journalist, if you hadn't even been on television, what do you think would you be today?
Мектеп бітірген жылдары әрине мен ол кезде жаңағы газеттерге жазып сызып жүргендіктен
When I graduated from high school, I was already writing articles for newspapers, and probably I would go to journalism anyway. And the most interesting thing is that after graduating the school, I had to make a serious choice. My late father then wanted me to become a lawyer. But when the choice arose between these two professions, I chose journalism. It turns out that if I had not entered the faculty of journalism, now probably I could have been a lawyer. What is journalists' responsibility in the present time amid social media's growing impact?
Өте орынды сұрақ. Журналистердің өздеріне қойылатын.
A very good question. Journalists have a great responsibility. We must do our duty so the audience trusts us. And for this, the information that we bring to the audience must be true, verified and accurate. This is a rule that has existed for a long time and which should always work. Of course, social networks today lead in the information space. We cannot hide it. But in what areas are they leading? In social networks, you can write 1 or 2 sentences and instantly publish information. But in television, everything is completely different. There is its own specific technology. This is a preparation for a live broadcast, arranging cameras, checking the entire studio. One needs to turn on the microphones. It all takes time. Therefore, television can compete with social networks only on the speed and urgency of the issuance of information. At the same time, social networks cannot compete with television in terms of accuracy, fact-checking, content, legibility, systematization, and fidelity of information, of course. Television has its own place. Television still wins. In addition, social networks do not impose any requirements for cleanliness of the text. Any person, depending on his education, can write a text, and there can be a lot of mistakes. But on television, this is simply not allowed, and accordingly does not happen. You were the host of the Joly program, which aired on the Khabar TV channel longer than any other program. Its main specificity is analytics. What, in your opinion, is the complexity of the analytical genre today?
әрине жеті күн ол хабармен бірге жасасып келе жатқан бағдарлама. Өзінің аудиториясы бар, өзінің көрермені бар. Әрине сараптамалық материал жасау, сараптамалық репортаж жасау ол оңай дүние емес.
Of course, Joly is a program that has been broadcasted since the creation of Khabar. It has its own audience. It is not an easy task to make analytical material, to create a whole analytical program. There are difficulties in this matter. It is necessary to consider and analyze the same problem from various angles, to listen to a whole series of different opinions. And as a result, he shall give viewers the opportunity to draw conclusions themselves. This is the difficulty. But today, I would say that there is still one problem on Kazakh television that becomes more and more urgent. This is a shortcoming of Kazakh-speaking spokespersons. Especially in the civil service, there are very few who can speak Kazakh well. They do not speak good enough. For example, you send a request to find out the position of the state on a particular topic, and in the whole ministry, sometimes among those who are in senior positions, you cannot find a person who could give us an interview in Kazakh, the state language. This is some kind of nonsense. This is not good. And one more thing. Basically, all the information sources we have are in Russian. Thus, we, the journalists, have another profession, to translate from Russian into Kazakh. This all creates inconvenience and difficulty. For example, in a newspaper, it is easier if any of the officials speaks Russian. You simply translate and give the material in Kazakh. And on television, the spokesman should speak Kazakh. Therefore, twice as much responsibility falls on journalists.
Siz эфирде өте салмақтысыз. Өмірде де сондайсыз.
You are very calm on the air, and the same in life. Since we work together, I am well aware of this. Having such a temper, do you still win more or lose?
Мен күні кешеге дейін жасыратыны жоқ. Осы тым сабырлылығымнан көп нәрседен ұтылдым деп есептеп келдім.
To be honest, I thought until the last that I lost more. But after some time, over the last couple of years, I still realized that this was not so. With my patience and restraint, I rather won. If I had not been so restrained, I probably would have made many mistakes in life. You said that you inherited this quality from your mother. I think yes, because my mother was a very reserved person. Not only me, all the relatives and people who were familiar with her noted her special character trait. Are you a touchy person, and how quickly do you forget the grievances?
Өзің сенген, жақын тұтқан, құрмет тұтқан адамдарың.
I quickly forget grievances. Of course, if a person whom I trusted, respected, considered my loved one upsets me, then I'm certainly offended. Although I would still forgive and forget. I think so. After all, psychologists say you shouldn't hold grudges for a long time. They harm your health. I am not vindictive. There were cases, but at such moments I draw certain conclusions, and that's it. I don't go and argue with that person. I draw conclusions for myself, and they stay with me. If I again meet a man who offended me, then I don't even let him feel something was amiss.
What
other qualities do you have that we do not know about? What inspires you?
Қырым жоқ шығар, мүмкін оның бәрін елге белгілі, мен біршама белгілі деп ойлаймын. Ал енді нені ұлттық саз...
I guess I don't have such qualities that you would not notice. I think that almost all of them are already familiar to everyone. I am inspired by our national music, sounds of Dombra, Termeh, Kazakh folk songs. I love books. And my family, of course, is my inspiration. You have a lot of friends, and what a friend should be in your understanding. I cannot say that I have many friends. Because in my understanding, a friend is a person who is ready to give his soul for you. there cannot be many such people, only a few. But in general, Abay said, love all of humanity, so I consider all people to be my friends.
Уақытыңызды бөліп бізге сұхбат бергеніңізге үлкен алғыс айтамыз.
Thank you very much for this wonderful conversation and good luck. Thank you very much.